Now in this part, we're going to add a Docker file that can be run from our Node server API. In particular, we're going to create a Node.js app that will run inside a Docker container. And then we can access the Node API through the browser via a port on our machine locally. Now the focus of this section is to get Node.js and our API working inside of a container. Now we already have the API, as we've mentioned already previously, so you should have cloned down that repo that contained the API. Now to make a Docker image, we need to first create a Docker file. Now the Docker file is a plain text file that has configuration settings inside it. Now the Docker file defines how the container behaves, what program it contains, what it does when it starts up as a container. Now, once we create a Docker file, we then pass it off to the Docker CLI. So this is the middle layer. So we pass it off to the Docker CLI client. Now this is the Docker CLI client through the terminal. So we're going to be accessing the CLI client through the terminal, as you'll see soon. Now the Docker CLI client will then pass the file to the Docker server. And then the Docker server is then going to do all of the heavy lifting. So it's going to pull down the base image. It's going to do the building of the image itself. Now, when creating the Docker files, almost all of them will have a base image, as we'll see. Because when you're building an image, you need to have a starting point. So you need to have a base image. So you need to have the base operating system. And they're almost always also going to have commands to install additional programs, as we'll see, and dependencies that are required by your application. So in our instance here, we have a Node application and it has certain dependencies that need to be installed. And then finally, it should also have a startup command. Now the command that is executed to boot up and start the container. And that's going to be the final piece of the Docker file. Now, let's actually do this in practice. So I just wanted to show the process of creating an image with Docker. So you first have the Docker file, and then you have the Docker CLI, and then you have the Docker server that ultimately builds the image for us, that then later on we can run a container from. So let's go to the terminal. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a Docker file. So let's do that now. Now the Docker file doesn't actually have any extension. It's just Docker file. So we're going to do touch. It's going to be capital D Docker, and then it's going to be file like that. So there's no extension. It's just going to be Docker file all in one word, and it doesn't have any extension. So make sure not to add any extensions on it. So once we do that, let's go back to our terminal here, and then we should have the Docker file. So to make sure that you've actually created it correctly, you should have the Docker logo next to it if you're using VS Code, that is. So if we open up the Docker file here, and let's start actually building our image. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the top here. So the first thing we need is going to be the base image that we require. So the base image is going to be the starting point. So you need to have an image that contains an operating system. It's going to be very minimal. So I'm just going to stick that in here for now. So there's some keywords in when you're building Docker images that you can use, and they're going to be in uppercase. So we have here from, and we're specifying a base image here. So the base image that we want to use is Node, and we want to use the Node version, which is 16. So as I mentioned already, we need to have a starting point. And because we're going to be running a Node application, we need to have Node and NPM installed, because those are the dependencies that our API relies on. So if I go back to the browser here and click on this tab here, I have the Docker Hub page open. Now I'm not currently logged in at the moment, but if I do a search here for Node, and here you'll see the different images that are available for Node. So the first one is going to be the official image that's released by Node itself. So if we click on here, and as you mentioned previously, Docker Hub is where you can pull all of the different images that you require. So you can pull a Node image, you can pull a Ruby image, you can pull a Redis image, any image that you can think of for any particular application or API, it's almost certainly available here. So we're interested in the Node image here because our API is written in Node. So the Node image here is the official image that's been released by the team at Node themselves. And as you're currently aware, there's different versions for Node. So here are the supported tags and the respective links. So if you just scroll through here, you can see it supports from Node version 12, and you have different variations, different things that each base image will contain. So some base images will have extra software that you might need. Some will be very minimal. So we're going for Node version 16, and we're going for in particular the Alpine version. Now Alpine in general, when you're using a base image, is a minimal image. So usually you have a standalone Alpine image, which is roughly I think about 5 megabytes, and that contains, you know, the bare minimum that you would require. But because we also need Node, we want to have a minimum of Node and npm, and it's called Node 16 Alpine, which is what we're using here. So depending obviously on the Node version that you want to support, you want to go through the supported tags here and the supported versions, and then use that for your particular API. Now the repo that you've cloned down and the one that we have open at the moment here, it actually uses Node version 10. So we're actually using the features that are quite old, but Node version 16 still works on it. So what you're going to do is obviously, depending on the API or your application that you're building, you're going to want to check out the correct Node version that you require. So that's what this is for. So the first part here defines the Node version, or defines the base image that contains the requirements that we need. So we need to have npm and we need to have Node installed. And this base image here, Node 16 here, basically has those requirements for us. So Node is the actual image itself, and then we're basically supplying a tag here after the colon to say the version of Node that we want to run. So you can run different versions and different variations that have different software installed, as we mentioned already. So let's now move on to the next part of the Docker file. So now we have a base version. The next thing that we need to specify is something called a working directory. So inside of the Node container itself, you can imagine it to be a brand new version of a computer that's running inside, or a brand new version of a file system that's running inside that container. So inside of the working directory, we want to specify a location that we can store our files. So in our local system, if you were to do an ls, you can see the working directory, so you can see the different folder structures that you have. So what we want to do is want to use the home directory inside the container. So currently at the moment we have our own home directory, and we want to use the home directory inside the container. So if I actually go back to the terminal here, if I just click on print working directory here you can see that we have the path in terms of where my current repo is stored here at the moment. So this is the path for it. What we want to do inside the container is we want to specify a working directory, and that's what the next piece or the next line is doing basically. We're saying the working directory keyword here, and we're going to specify the home, and then we're going to create, this will create a new folder called app, and it's going to stick all of our files inside there. Now this is important because what's going to happen is you might have some files that have the same names as, say, some system directory files or system directory folders inside the container. So there could be a conflict there. So to avoid that, we're going to specify a working directory inside the container itself. So we're basically saying in the home directory, create a new folder called app, and then basically put all of our Node modules, all of the source files in here, which we're going to specify in just a moment, inside of that app folder or app directory itself. So that's what that's doing there. And then the next bit we're going to do is we're going to copy across all of the files and directories into that location that we've specified here. So we're basically going to copy everything here into the app location there. So that's what this copy command is for. So we're going to copy everything in this current directory, and we're going to copy it into the app folder that we've specified previously. And then we're going to run npm install. So at this point, we should have npm installed, because remember we said that we got the base version, which is Node 16 Alpine, and that should have Node and npm installed. So we're going to run npm install, and it's going to install all of the dependencies from the package.json file. And then we're going to specify a command to start up the application. So we're going to tell it what to use to start up the application. So we're going to start up the application using the npm package manager, and the command that we're going to pass to it is going to be the start command. So for this, you need to make sure inside your package.json file. So if I open this here, that you have a start script. So I have a start script here that basically says use node, which should already be installed as our base image, and then go into the source and then the index.js file and start up our server that way. So that's what that command is there to do. So it's going to specify how the container should start up the API inside it. And that's all that's doing there. And that's all there is to it that we need for now. So in terms of building an image and then creating a container from that image for our API, this is all we need. So we need the base image that we have already. We need the working directory. We need to copy across all of the files, including the package.json. We need to then run npm install, and then we need to run the npm start command or supply the start command to start up our application. Now, in the next step, we're going to build this Docker file and we're going to be adding a tag on it.